It all started with a wrong number. Elena Vale was not the type of woman who lived dangerously. Her world was made of small rituals. The creak of the bookstore's back door when she slipped inside each morning before sunrise, the smell of dust and forgotten stories clinging to her hands, the faint ring of the bell that announced the occasional customer. It was a life quiet enough to feel invisible, and perhaps that was why she had chosen it. Books never betrayed, shelves never lied, and solitude, while sometimes cruel, was always predictable. But on that sleepless night, solitude turned on her. Her landlord had called again, his voice sharp and ugly. "One more week, Elena. 1. Then I change the locks. I don't care where you go." His threat gnawed at her long after the call ended. Rent money was short. Hours at the bookstore were shrinking. Her mother was gone, her father estranged, and though she hated to admit it, she had no one. Not really. No one who could swoop in, no one who could tell the landlord to back down. Her hands trembled as she dialed her cousin's number, desperate for someone, anyone, to hear her breaking voice. But the screen blurred with tears, her fingers slipped, and a wrong digit carried her call into a stranger's world. The voice that answered was no ordinary man. Deep, velvet smooth, laced with lethal promise. "Do you know what time it is?" Her breath caught. This was not her cousin. This was not safety. I'm sorry," she stammered, pressing the phone harder against her ear as though she could crush the mistake. "I didn't mean wrong number." A pause. She could almost hear the weight of his silence pressing down the line as though he leaned closer, studying her through the dark. Then, softly, a question she wasn't expecting. "What's your name?" "Elena." Her own voice betrayed her before she could think better of it. Shaken, desperate, but not entirely broken. "Elena," he repeated, tasting it slowly, savoring it in a way that made her stomach twist. "Do you always call strangers in the middle of the night?" She wanted to hang up. She should have hung up. But something in the way he spoke, command wrapped in curiosity, danger threaded with charm, held her frozen. She finally forced the call to end, fumbling the phone onto her nightstand like it had burned her skin. That should have been the end, it wasn't. Hours later, the hum of engines woke her, not one car, not two, a fleet. Elena rose from her narrow bed, heart thudding as headlights painted long, eerie shadows across her wall. She pushed aside the curtain and froze. Her quiet street, usually forgotten, usually safe in its smallness, was devoured by black. Sleek cars lined the block, engines low, doors opening in synchronized menace. Men in sharp suits spilled out, moving with the precision of soldiers. 50, maybe more. The pavement echoed beneath their polished shoes, their eyes hidden behind midnight glass. At their center walked the man himself. She didn't know his name yet, but she knew instinctively who he was. He carried power in every step, cold and magnetic like a storm disguised in tailored wool. The air seemed to bend around him, pulling life and breath out of the night. She had heard that voice hours earlier, velvet and steel, and now it had a body, tall, broad-shouldered, dark-eyed, lethal. Neighbors peeked through curtains, whispers crackling like fire. Who is he? Why are they here? What has she done? Elena's hands clenched around her phone. This couldn't be real. It had to be some twisted dream born of exhaustion. But when she stepped out onto her porch, the night chilled her bones with certainty. The man's gaze locked on her as though he had come for no one else. She swallowed hard, her lips trembling. Why are you here?" He didn't answer immediately. He studied her instead, the way a predator studies prey, not with haste, but with patience, as though every detail mattered. When he finally spoke, his words cut through the night like a blade. "You called me." Elena shook her head, panic tightening her chest. It was a mistake. Nothing is a mistake. His men fanned out behind him, silent and watchful, while he mounted the steps of her porch like he already owned it. "When someone speaks my name into the dark, I answer. When someone calls me, I come. Her breath stuttered. I don't even know your name. You will. His lips curved, not in kindness, but in something sharper, something that promised both danger and salvation. Dominic Viero. The name struck her with the weight of whispered stories. The Mafia boss who ruled the city's underworld, the shadow people feared to speak of in daylight. And now he stood inches away, summoned not by enemies or allies, but by her wrong number. Elena's pulse thundered. She wanted to run back inside, to slam the door and pretend she had never lifted the phone. But his presence held her fast, a gravity she couldn't defy. He leaned closer, voice low enough for only her. Tell me, Elena, why did your voice sound so desperate tonight? She opened her mouth, but no words came. Because she had no rent money? Because she was tired of being small and forgotten? Because loneliness had finally driven her to dial the wrong number? None of those answers would satisfy a man like him. Her silence only deepened his intrigue. Dominic reached into his coat, pulling out a sleek black glove, sliding it onto his hand as though sealing a vow. Then he turned to his men, his command sharp and final. She's under my protection now. Elena gasped, stumbling back. No, I don't need... But her protests were drowned beneath the roar of 50 men moving as one, their loyalty unquestioned. In that instant, the quiet bookstore clerk became the woman claimed by a king of shadows. And with that one wrong call, Elena's life was no longer her own. The night swallowed her world whole. Inside her chest, a war raged, terror clawing at reason, curiosity tangling with fear. She should hate him for invading her life, for dragging his darkness to her door. Yet when Dominic's eyes lingered on her, sharp but unreadable, something unspoken passed between them, something that whispered she had just become the center of a story far larger, far more dangerous than her own. And though she didn't yet know if she would survive it, one truth settled deep inside her. This man, this mistake, would change everything. What would you do if the wrong number you dialed brought 50 dangerous men to your door? Would you hide or step outside to face the man at their center? Morning light had never felt so foreign. Elena sat on the edge of her narrow bed, staring at the floor as though it might open up and swallow her. Outside, the street was quiet again, as if the parade of black cars and soldiers in suits had been a hallucination. Curtains fluttered from neighbors' windows. Eyes had definitely watched, though no one dared to ask questions. No one dared to speak the name Dominic Viero. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A simple message, no name attached, but the weight of it pressed heavy. You're safe. Do not leave your house. Safe. The word almost made her laugh. Safe was mornings in the bookstore, stacking novels, pretending the world was small enough to hold in her palms. Safe wasn't being marked by the Mafia boss she'd only heard about in whispers. Still, she dressed and forced herself to walk to work, the bell over the bookstore door ringing as if to ground her back in normalcy. The scent of ink, dust, and old wood wrapped around her like a fragile blanket. Elena! Sophia, her best friend since childhood, bounded in minutes later, her voice a bright melody in the dim shop. Where Elena carried quiet shadows, Sophia carried light. Tall, confident, hair like fire, laughter that turned heads. She plopped onto the counter with a grin. You didn't answer my text last night. Don't tell me you were reading again until dawn. Elena's lips parted, 1,000 truths clawing to get out. 50 men, a name that still haunted her ears, protection she hadn't asked for. Instead, she smiled thinly. Something like that. Sophia narrowed her eyes, not fooled. You're pale. You look like you've seen a ghost. Not a ghost. A king cloaked in darkness. Sophia leaned closer, voice dropping. Listen, I've heard stories. There's been movement in the city. Men in suits, cars at night. If you've gotten tangled up with anyone dangerous... I haven't. Elena cut in too quickly. Her hands trembled as she stacked books, their spines wobbling. Sophia studied her with quiet worry. I know you, Elena. You keep secrets until they eat you alive. Just don't let anyone pull you into something you can't escape, especially not men with power. The words lingered like a warning. Across the city, in a penthouse lined with glass and shadow, Dominic Viero stood at a window watching the world below like it was a chessboard. His reflection stared back. Dark eyes, sharp jaw, power draped over him like a second skin. Men moved around him, delivering reports, but his mind was elsewhere. On her, the girl with trembling hands and fire in her voice. Elena Vale. She hadn't cowered the way most did when he approached. She had looked at him as if trying to see beyond the steel mask he wore, as if some part of her believed he was more than his empire of shadows. That intrigued him. It unsettled him. Dominic poured a glass of whiskey, his fingers tightening around the crystal. He was a man who took what he wanted. Cities bent to his will. Rivals fell beneath his hand. And yet, when it came to her, something in him hesitated. Why did he care what she thought of him? Why had her voice clung to him long after the call ended? Boss. One of his lieutenants cleared his throat. About the Caruso family. They've been circling your businesses again. And there's talk they've been sniffing around that street last night. Dominic's gaze hardened. Caruso. A name drenched in blood and betrayal. If they had seen him at Elena's house, if they believed she mattered to him, then she was already in danger. His jaw clenched. She called me by mistake. But mistakes don't exist. Not in my world. He would protect her, whether she liked it or not. That night, Elena sat in the bookstore's back room, sipping weak tea from a chipped mug, trying to will herself into calm. She told herself that the world had reset, that men in black suits would never again shadow her doorstep. But when the bell above the door chimed after hours, she froze. The figure who stepped inside didn't belong to her world. Tall, suited, presence commanding the room without effort. Dominic. She rose so quickly her chair scraped the floor. What are you doing here? Checking on you. His voice was low, dangerous, yet carrying something quieter beneath, something almost protective. Her pulse raced. You can't just walk into my life like this. I didn't ask for your help. No, he said, stepping closer, his shadow stretching long across the stacks of books. But you need it. Her breath caught. His nearness was suffocating, his cologne sharp and dark like cedar smoke and night air. She hated that part of her, wanted to lean into it. Why me? She whispered. You don't even know me. Dominic's gaze lingered on her face, unflinching. Because when I heard your voice, I knew someone would try to break it, and I don't let things I value break. The words stole the ground from beneath her. He couldn't mean it. She was no one, just a woman with overdue rent and shelves of forgotten books. And yet, in his eyes, she saw something she hadn't felt in years. Recognition. Her chest ached with both fear and something far more dangerous, hope. Elena thought she could escape him by hiding behind her bookstore's shelves, by stacking novels high enough to drown out the echo of his name. But Dominic Viero was not the kind of man you ignored. He was the storm that found its way in through cracks, the shadow that slipped beneath doors. And that storm broke into her life fully 3 nights later. The landlord was back. His voice thundered through the thin wood of her apartment door. You think you can keep ducking me? Rent's late again, girl. This isn't a charity. Pay up, or you're out. Elena pressed her palms to her ears, her heart hammering. She had scraped together barely half of what she owed. She'd begged for more hours at the bookstore, but business was slow. Fear knotted inside her chest, fear of losing the one safe space she still had. She tried to answer, tried to plead for one more week, but her landlord's threats drowned her words. Then silence. Not the silence of mercy, but the silence of something else. A presence. When Elena opened her door, the landlord was pinned against the opposite wall by a man in black. Dominic stood between them, calm, lethal, as though the hallway belonged to him. Her landlord's face drained of blood. I didn't know she was... Dominic's voice was ice. Mine. Elena's stomach dropped. Wait, the landlord stammered, hands raised. Dominic's men appeared behind him, shadows with guns tucked discreetly at their sides. The landlord fled without another word, shoes pounding down the stairs like gunfire. Elena's voice finally returned, sharp and trembling. You can't just do that. Dominic turned to her, eyes steady. I can, and I did. Her breath stuttered. You don't own me. You don't even know me. A slow smile ghosted his lips, but it wasn't amusement. It was warning. I know enough. I know you're vulnerable. And I know men like him will keep circling until someone makes them stop. I didn't ask you to stop him. You didn't need to. His gaze darkened, something unreadable flickering there. You called me, Elena, whether you meant to or not. Her throat tightened. She had told herself that call was a mistake, that it meant nothing. But hearing him speak it like destiny chilled her. The next morning, the bookstore was quiet, golden light spilling across dust motes. Elena tried to lose herself in the familiar, shelving, dusting, breathing the scent of paper, but her hands shook too badly to hold the book steady. The bell chimed. She stiffened, praying it was Sophia. It wasn't. Dominic stepped in like the shop was his kingdom too. Suited, polished, terrifyingly composed. He trailed his fingers along the spines of novels as though they were weapons. Her voice came out harsher than she intended. You can't keep showing up. I can go wherever I like. And you think you can just decide I need protection? He studied her, and for the first time, she saw something flicker beneath the steel, curiosity, almost admiration. You're not afraid of me. She swallowed hard. I should be. Yes. His lips curved faintly. You should. Their eyes locked, tension coiling between them. She hated how aware she was of his nearness, how her pulse betrayed her, how his voice lingered even after silence returned. That evening, Sophia stormed into her apartment, waving her arms. Okay, what is going on? People are whispering about black cars parked outside your street. Don't lie to me, Elena. Elena bit her lip, torn between truth and safety. I made a mistake. I called the wrong number. Sophia blinked. And what? You called a Mafia boss instead of your cousin? The silence was answer enough. Oh my God. Sophia sank onto the couch, staring at her. Do you have any idea what you've done? These men don't play. You can't flirt with fire and expect not to burn. I'm not flirting, Elena snapped too loudly. I can't get away. Sophia reached out, gripping her hands. Then you need to run. Now. Before he decides he wants more than your voice. Elena's heart pounded, but when she closed her eyes, she didn't see escape. She saw Dominic's eyes, cold, magnetic, and for one impossible heartbeat, almost tender. That night, her phone buzzed again. A single message. Be ready tomorrow. You're coming with me. Her fingers hovered over the screen, terror warring with something she refused to name. She should delete it. Block him. Pretend this nightmare wasn't real. But her thumb didn't move, because part of her knew the storm had already claimed her. Elena didn't sleep. The glow of her phone lay on the nightstand like a brand, Dominic's message burning her from the inside out. Be ready tomorrow. You're coming with me. She paced her tiny apartment until dawn crept through the blinds. She could run, pack a bag, and vanish before the city woke. But run where? Dominic had men everywhere. She felt it in her bones. There was no place small enough to hide from him. When the knock came, it wasn't a knock at all. It was the heavy thud of power. Elena opened her door to find two of his men waiting, suits sharp, expressions unreadable. Behind them, parked at the curb, gleamed a black car so polished it reflected the pale morning sky. "Miss Vale," one of them said. "The boss is expecting you." Her mouth went dry. Every instinct screamed no, but her feet betrayed her. She slid into the car, heart hammering, and the world she knew slipped away behind tinted glass. The car pulled up to a mansion perched on the city's highest hill. Marble steps stretched like a throne's staircase. Iron gates loomed, flanked by men with eyes like stone. Elena had read about places like this, but seeing it in flesh and shadow was different. It wasn't just a home, it was an empire. Inside, the air smelled of leather and power. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across black marble floors. Men moved silently through the hall, armed yet invisible, shadows disguised in elegance. Dominic waited in the heart of it all. He sat behind a mahogany desk, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled to his forearms. Papers lay scattered before him, but he wasn't reading them. His eyes were fixed on her. "Sit." It wasn't a request. Elena perched on the edge of the leather chair, stiff as a cornered bird. "Why am I here?" Dominic leaned back, studying her like she was another deal to be made. "Because the world believes you're mine now, and if they believe it, it must be true." Her pulse jumped. "That's insane. I barely know you." His mouth curved slightly. "You'll learn." "I don't want to." "You will." The silence stretched, thick with things unspoken. He was too close, his presence too heavy, and yet Elena couldn't look away. Finally, she found her voice. "What do you want from me?" His gaze lingered on her face, steady, deliberate. Honesty, loyalty, and perhaps a little patience. The words unsettled her more than threats would have. Days bled into a rhythm Elena didn't choose. Dominic insisted she stay in his mansion under protection. Every room echoed with wealth, but to her, it felt like a gilded cage. Men guarded the halls, security cameras blinked from corners. Yet strangely, he gave her freedom inside his walls. She explored libraries filled with leather-bound books, gardens lit by lanterns at night, balconies that overlooked the glittering city. And sometimes, she caught him watching her, not as a predator, but as a man starved for something he couldn't name. The culture clash was undeniable. At dinner, crystal goblets and silver cutlery gleamed, food laid out like art. Elena, who was used to reheated noodles and chipped mugs, sat rigid. She barely touched the dishes, her hunger swallowed by nerves. "You're not eating," Dominic observed one evening, his tone low, unreadable. "I'm not used to all this." "All this," he echoed, as if the wealth around them meant nothing. He leaned closer, eyes locked on hers. "Then tell me what you are used to." Her throat tightened. She thought of her bookstore, of dust and ink, of laughter shared with Sophia, of quiet mornings with tea. Worlds apart from his. "Small things," she whispered. "Things no one else cares about." Dominic's expression flickered. For the briefest moment, his mask cracked, revealing a man who understood too well the weight of solitude. But danger never lingered far. One night, as they walked the lantern-lit gardens, a shadow moved in the trees. A shot rang out, sharp and merciless. Elena gasped as Dominic grabbed her, pulling her against his chest, shielding her body with his own. His men swarmed, firing back into the dark. By the time the intruder fell, Dominic's grip on her was iron, his breath hot against her hair. "Do you see now why you can't leave?" Her hands shook, clutching his shirt without meaning to. "They were aiming for you." His jaw tightened. "No, they were aiming for you." The words gutted her. "Because of me. Because I called him." That night she lay awake in the grand guest room staring at the ceiling. She should be terrified, and she was. But beneath the terror, a dangerous truth stirred. Part of her felt safer in Dominic's arms than she ever had alone. The tension between them grew. It lived in glances too long, in silences that hummed, in the way his hand would brush hers when they walked the halls. One evening, he found her in the library, curled in a chair with a book she could barely focus on. "You don't belong in my world," he said quietly. She lifted her eyes. "Then let me go." "I can't." His voice was raw, stripped bare. "Because every time I think of losing you, I remember the sound of your voice that night. Desperate, defiant. And I wonder if maybe it wasn't a mistake at all." Her chest ached. "You're wrong. It was." But her trembling hands betrayed her. Dominic stepped closer, his shadow swallowing the lamplight. "Tell me, Elena, do you truly want me to leave you alone?" The question lodged in her throat, heavy, impossible. Because the truth was this: she didn't know anymore. The Caruso family's whispers spread like fire. Elena overheard Dominic's men murmuring in the hall. They know about the girl. They think she's his weakness. And maybe she was. Because with every day that passed, Elena felt herself pulled deeper into Dominic's world, into his empire of shadows, into the gravity of his presence. She wanted to resist. She told herself she was resisting. But when his eyes lingered on her, dark and searching, she couldn't silence the dangerous thought blooming in her chest. What if I was meant to call him? What if this mistake was fate? Elena stood in the library again, fingers brushing the cracked spines of books she couldn't bring herself to read. The mansion was too quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed on her chest until breathing hurt. Dominic had been gone all day. Meetings, business, shadows. And in his absence, whispers filled the halls. Two of his men spoke near the staircase, voices low but urgent. "Caruso's digging. Found something about her father." "Keep your voice down. If the boss hears—" "I'm telling you, it matters. She's not just some random girl. Her old man worked with us years ago, before he disappeared." Elena froze, her breath catching like glass shattering inside her. Her father, the man who had vanished from her life when she was 10. She'd grown up believing he'd simply abandoned them, leaving her mother to break under the weight of rent, grief, and loneliness. She had built her entire life on that wound. And now they were saying he had ties to Dominic's world. Her legs shook as she stumbled backward, knocking a book to the floor. The men stopped talking instantly, their eyes snapping to her. "Elena," one began. But she fled before they could say more. She found Dominic in his office, leaning over maps and papers, sleeves rolled up, his jaw set with steel. Her voice cracked the moment it left her throat. "My father. What do you know about him?" Dominic's head lifted slowly, his eyes locked on hers, unreadable, but too sharp to be innocent. "Elena, don't." She shook her head, tears blurring her vision. "Don't act like you don't know. I heard them. He worked for people like you. Didn't he?" Dominic came around the desk, slow, deliberate as though he was approaching a wild animal that might bolt. His voice was low, almost tender. "Your father was loyal. He wasn't like the rest. He wanted out. For you. For your mother. And that's why he died." The words struck like thunder. "Died?" Dominic's jaw tightened. Caruso betrayed him. He tried to walk away, and they made sure he didn't. Her knees weakened, fury and grief twisting inside her. All those years hating a ghost, believing she'd been abandoned, when in truth her father had been murdered. And Dominic had known all along. "You should have told me," she whispered. "I was trying to protect you." His voice broke its usual steel, rough around the edges. "From this truth. From them. From me." Her tears fell hot and relentless. "You don't get to decide what truths I can bear." Dominic's hands clenched at his sides. For once, the man who commanded empires looked almost powerless. That night, Elena wandered the garden alone, lantern light catching her tears. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to hate everything he stood for. And yet, when she thought of her father's death, of the Carusos circling her life, it wasn't hatred that gripped her. It was a longing for the only man who had ever promised to protect her. She didn't hear Dominic approach until his shadow fell over her. "Elena." His voice was hoarse, stripped bare. She turned to him, eyes blazing with unshed tears. "Why me? Out of everyone in your world, why did you decide I mattered?" He didn't hesitate. "Because your voice reminded me of something I thought I'd lost, something I thought couldn't exist anymore." Her chest ached. "And what's that?" "Hope." The word fractured her, because she felt it too, buried beneath fear and grief, clawing its way to the surface. He reached for her, slow enough to let her step back. She didn't. His hand brushed her cheek, calloused and warm, anchoring her in a way she hadn't felt in years. "Elena," he murmured, his forehead lowering to hers. "I will burn this city before I let them touch you." And then his lips were on hers. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was a storm breaking open, years of loneliness colliding in one desperate kiss. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer even as her mind screamed danger. He kissed her like she was the first and last thing he would ever claim. When they finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, she knew the truth she'd been running from. This wasn't a mistake anymore. It was fate. But fate carried a cruel twist. Because if Caruso had killed her father, if Caruso knew she now belonged to Dominic, then Elena wasn't just under Dominic's protection. She was bait. And the trap was already closing. The kiss had changed everything, and yet nothing. Elena lay awake that night in the vast guest room of Dominic's mansion, the silk sheets cool against her overheated skin. Her lips still tingled, her body still ached with the memory of his mouth on hers, but beneath the fire was a storm of fear. She knew now that she was more than a bystander in this world. She was a target. Her father's blood had spilled in the same war, and the Caruso family hadn't forgotten. Every sound outside her window made her jolt. Every creak of the house seemed like an intruder. She wanted to believe Dominic's promise, that he would burn the city before letting anyone touch her. But she had seen the rage in his eyes when he spoke Caruso's name. That rage could consume him, it could consume them both. And as dawn broke, her worst fear began to take shape. She was in the library when the first shot rang out. It shattered the glass window near her, spraying shards across the floor. She ducked behind the chair, heart pounding, screams caught in her throat. Within seconds, Dominic's men swarmed, pulling her into the hall, weapons raised. "Keep her safe," one barked, shoving her toward the inner staircase. But the walls of the mansion trembled with chaos. Gunfire cracked outside, men shouting, tires screeching. Elena clutched the banister, terror tightening her chest. This wasn't just a warning, this was war. Dominic appeared at the top of the stairs, dark suit unbuttoned, gun in hand, his presence commanding even in the chaos. His gaze locked on her instantly, relief flashing across his hard features. "Get her downstairs," he ordered. "Safe room. Now." "No," Elena gasped, her voice raw. "What's happening?" "They've found you." His jaw tightened. "Caruso knows exactly where you are?" She staggered back. "Because of you. Because you told them I mattered." His eyes darkened. "Because you do." They didn't make it to the safe room. In the confusion, a blast rocked the far wall of the mansion, dust and smoke filling the air. Men shouted as enemies poured through the breach. Dominic fired, precise and lethal, but there were too many. One of Caruso's men grabbed Elena, dragging her backward. Her scream tore through the hall, but Dominic's roar was louder. He lunged, bullets slicing past his shoulder. But another explosion separated them, collapsing part of the ceiling. Elena struggled, kicking, clawing, her nails raking down the arm that held her. "Let me go." "Boss wants you alive," the man sneered, tightening his grip. She caught one last glimpse of Dominic through the smoke, blood on his temple, fury in his eyes, shouting her name, as they shoved her into a waiting car. The door slammed, the engine roared, and her world went black. When Elena woke, her wrists were bound to a chair, the air thick with mildew and gasoline. A warehouse. The dim light bulb overhead buzzed, casting harsh shadows across concrete floors. Caruso himself stepped from the dark. He was everything Dominic was not. Sloppy where Dominic was precise, cruel where Dominic was controlled. His smile was venom. "So," he drawled, circling her like a predator. The little bird who caught Viero's eye. "I must admit, I didn't expect you to look so ordinary." Her chin lifted, defiance sparking even through fear. "Let me go." He laughed. "Ah, you have his fire. No wonder he's gone mad. Do you know what it means, Elena? For Dominic Viero to put his empire at risk. For you?" Her stomach twisted. "I never asked him to—" "No," Caruso interrupted, leaning close enough that she smelled his sour breath. "But he did. And now, you're going to help me break him." Elena's heart pounded. She knew what that meant. Not just leverage, not just bait. She was the weapon. Back at the mansion, Dominic stood in the wreckage, blood trickling down his temple, fury burning hotter than the fires still smoldering outside. His men reported casualties, damages, losses, but he barely heard them. They had taken her. He slammed his fist against the marble wall, the crack echoing like thunder. "Find them," he growled, his voice low and lethal. "I don't care what it costs. Find her." "Boss," one of his lieutenants urged carefully, "they'll expect you to come for her. It's a trap." "I know," Dominic snarled, grabbing the man by the collar. "And I'll walk into it anyway." His men exchanged uneasy glances. Their leader had always been calculated, cold, untouchable. But now, with Elena in Caruso's hands, he was something else entirely, something dangerous even to himself. Hours stretched like days in the warehouse. Elena's wrists ached, her throat dry. Caruso's men whispered about what they would do when Dominic came, about how they would make him watch. Despair gnawed at her. She thought of her mother, who had died broken and alone. She thought of her father, betrayed by this same family. Would she end the same way? Forgotten, discarded, a casualty in someone else's war? Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to believe Dominic would come, that his promise to burn the city for her wasn't just words. But what if he failed? What if she was already lost? Her chest heaved with quiet sobs. For the first time, she let herself whisper the truth into the silence. "I don't want to die unseen. I don't want to be forgotten." By nightfall, Dominic had tracked them to the warehouse district. He stood on the rooftop opposite, rain slicking his hair, gun heavy in his hand. His men urged caution, begged him to wait for reinforcements. But patience had burned out of him the moment they touched her. He could see her through the cracked window, tied to a chair, pale, her head bowed. The sight nearly broke him. "This is my fault," he murmured. "I should have sent her away." But the thought of her gone, of her voice silenced, was unbearable. He chambered around, jaw set. "We go in now." The warehouse erupted in violence. Dominic's men stormed through the doors, gunfire splitting the air. Caruso's soldiers fired back, the concrete echoing with chaos. Elena flinched as bullets ricocheted, her screams drowned by the battle. She struggled against her bonds, wrists raw, until finally, blessedly, the chair toppled sideways. Pain shot through her shoulder, but the ropes loosened enough for her to slip free. Crawling across the floor, she searched for anything to defend herself. Her hand closed around a shard of broken glass. Caruso appeared, gun in hand, sneer curling his lips. "Stay down, girl. Your part isn't finished yet." But Elena rose, defiance burning through terror. "I'm not your weapon." He lunged, but before he could strike, a shot rang out. Dominic stood in the doorway, smoke curling from his gun barrel, eyes locked on Caruso with pure hatred. "You touched what's mine," Dominic growled. The fight between them was brutal, raw, primal. Fists, bullets, rage. Caruso landed blows, But Dominic fought like a man with nothing left to lose. At last, with one final shot, Caruso collapsed, lifeless on the concrete. Silence fell. Dominic turned, chest heaving, eyes searching. And there she was, shaking, blood on her hands, but alive. "Elena!" She stumbled toward him, collapsing against his chest, his arms wrapped around her, crushing, desperate, as though he was afraid she might vanish if he let go. "I thought I'd lost you," he rasped, voice breaking. Her tears soaked his shirt. "I thought you'd let me go." "Never," he vowed, pressing his forehead to hers. "Not now, not ever." But victory tasted bitter. Dominic was wounded, his empire shaken. Elena, though safe in his arms, felt hollow. Caruso was dead, but the war wasn't over. His allies would come, his men would seek vengeance, and she was no longer invisible. She was the crack in Dominic's armor, the weakness everyone could see. Back at the mansion, she sat alone in her room, staring at the city lights. She thought of the life she'd lost, the bookstore, Sophia's laughter, the quiet safety of small routines. Could she ever go back? The answer twisted in her gut. No, she couldn't. Her life was bound to Dominic's now. Whether it ended in love or ruin, she belonged to this storm. And the storm wasn't over. Days later, she confessed the truth to Dominic in the garden, her voice trembling. "I'm scared, not of them, of this, of you. Because if I love you, and you're destroyed, then what's left of me?" Dominic cupped her face, his eyes fierce, pained. "Then I'll make sure I'm not destroyed. For you. Because losing you is the only thing I can't survive." But his vow felt like a curse. Because in his world, nothing was certain. Nothing was safe. And as she clung to him beneath the lantern light, Elena knew the darkest hour wasn't behind them. It had only just begun. Rain slicked the city streets, washing blood into the gutters, cleansing nothing. Elena sat at the window of Dominic's mansion, forehead against the glass, watching the storm blur the skyline. Caruso was dead, yet peace hadn't followed. If anything, the silence that lingered after the battle felt sharper, more dangerous than gunfire. Every breath she took in Dominic's world came at a price. She had seen men die. She had watched Dominic fight like a beast to reach her. She had felt his arms around her, warm, desperate, a tether that had pulled her back from the abyss. But now, days later, she feared it was all slipping away. Because if Dominic had proven anything, it was that he would bleed for her. But he hadn't yet proven he could live for her. And living was what she needed most. The mansion hummed with tension. Men patrolled every hall, their eyes sharper, their hands always hovering near their weapons. Rival factions whispered Caruso's death like a prayer and a curse, some plotting revenge, others waiting to see if Dominic's empire would crack. Inside, Elena drifted between rooms like a ghost. The chandeliers glimmered, the marble shone, the gardens bloomed, but none of it felt alive. She missed the smell of paper, the creak of her bookstore door, the clink of Sophia's laughter. She missed herself. Sophia visited once, slipping past the guards with a fierceness Elena had forgotten she possessed. "You look like you're disappearing," Sophia whispered, gripping Elena's hands tightly in the quiet of the library. "This man, he saved you, I know. But he's also the reason they took you in the first place. Don't let him be both your destruction and your salvation." Tears stung Elena's eyes. "I don't know how to separate the two anymore." Sophia squeezed harder. "Then you have to decide what you want more, your life as it was or him, because you can't have both." Elena wanted to argue, but the truth settled deep in her chest like lead. Sophia was right. Meanwhile, Dominic buried himself in work. Maps, deals, late-night calls with allies. He tightened security, expanded his network, struck alliances born of necessity. His empire could not appear weak, but behind the steel mask, guilt gnawed at him. He stood on the balcony one night, whiskey glass untouched in his hand, staring at the city he controlled and loathed. The rain plastered his shirt to his chest, but he didn't move. "You think killing Caruso fixed it?" his brother Matteo asked, stepping outside. "There will always be another Caruso." Dominic's jaw clenched. "I don't care about them. I care about her." "Then you need to stop pretending you can have both, her and this world. One will always destroy the other." Dominic didn't answer, but his silence admitted what he couldn't speak. The breaking point came 3 nights later. Elena overheard Dominic's men arguing in the hall. "She's his weakness. They'll come again. If he doesn't let her go, she'll die and take half of us with her." That night, she confronted him. "Let me leave," she demanded, standing in the center of his office, her fists clenched at her sides. "Send me away before they come again. Before I cost you more lives." Dominic looked up from his desk, eyes dark with fatigue and something sharper. "You think I'll let you walk out of here knowing Caruso's allies are still hunting you? You can protect me from them. But who's protecting me from you?" His face hardened, but not with anger, with pain. "You think I'm your enemy? I think you're a man who doesn't know how to stop fighting, and if I stay, I'll drown in your war." Her voice broke, and she turned toward the door. But before she could reach it, his voice followed, raw and unguarded. "I've already drowned, Elena. The night you called me, I stopped fighting for myself. I fight only for you." She froze, her chest aching. She wanted to hate him for the truth in his voice, but she couldn't. The next morning, Dominic summoned her to the study. He stood with an old file in his hand, edges yellowed, ink faded. "This belonged to your father," he said quietly. Her breath caught as he handed it to her. Inside were records, letters, accounts of debts and betrayals. Her father had tried to protect her, tried to shield her from this life. But the Carusos had cornered him, forced his hand, and ultimately killed him for trying to walk away. Elena's tears blurred the words. "All this time, I thought he abandoned us." Dominic's voice was hoarse. "He died fighting for you. Just as I will, if it comes to that." Her heart fractured and mended in the same beat, because she understood now. Her father's story wasn't abandonment, it was love, and Dominic's story might not be violence, it might be redemption. She looked at him through tears. "Then don't die. Live. Live for me." The silence that followed was heavier than any gunfire. Dominic's eyes softened, his mask cracking wide open. And in that moment, something shifted. From that day, things changed. Slowly, carefully. Dominic began pulling Elena into decisions. Not about his empire, but about her safety, her choices, her life. He gave her back pieces of the control he had taken, and with it, a flicker of hope returned. He found her one evening in the garden, her hands brushing the petals of roses, her face tilted toward the stars. "You don't belong in cages," he murmured. "Then stop building them around me." His lips curved faintly. "Help me tear them down." And for the first time, she believed he meant it. One night, after weeks of walls slowly crumbling, they sat together in the library. A storm raged outside, lightning flashing across the glass, but inside, the world was quiet. Elena read aloud from a book, her voice trembling but steadying with every word. Dominic sat opposite her, eyes fixed not on the pages, but on her. When she finished, silence stretched, thick and tender. "Your voice," he said softly. "It saved me before I ever saw your face." Her throat tightened. "And now? Now it's the only thing keeping me alive." The kiss that followed was different from the first. Softer, deeper. Not desperation, but promise. It was two broken souls binding their cracks together, daring to believe in something neither thought they could have. But hope was fragile. Reports trickled in. Caruso's allies were uniting, gathering strength. They believed Dominic was weakened by his obsession with Elena, and they weren't wrong. One night, Dominic's men intercepted a message. The girl is the key. Take her, and Viero falls. Dominic's fury was volcanic. They will not touch her again. But beneath his rage, Elena saw something else. Fear. He was terrified. Not of losing his empire, but of losing her. And for the first time, she realized she was terrified too. Not of dying, of living without him. It came down to a choice. Dominic called her into his office, his hands trembling slightly as he poured a drink he didn't touch. I can send you away. New name, new city, protection. You'd be safe. Elena stared at him, heart twisting. And what about you? I'd keep fighting, but at least you'd live. Her tears spilled over. I don't want to live without you. Elena? No, she said firmly, her voice steadier than she felt. You keep talking about saving me. But maybe I'm here to save you too, to remind you that you're more than this war. Dominic's breath hitched. He stepped closer, his hands cradling her face like she was something fragile he didn't deserve. Then stay, he whispered. Stay and let me fight with you, not for you. And for the first time, she said the word aloud. Yes. The decision ignited something in both of them. Elena wasn't just Dominic's weakness anymore, she was his partner. She began learning, watching, listening. She studied the maps, the names, the strategies. She wasn't a pawn in his game. She was a queen, moving with purpose. And Dominic, he softened. Not in strength, but in soul. He laughed more. He listened. He let her see the man behind the boss, the man who read poetry when the world was asleep, who carried scars from battles no one else remembered. Together, they built something neither of them had dared hope for. Not just survival, but the beginnings of a life worth fighting for. The war still loomed. The enemies still circled. But in their hearts, a fire had been lit, and it was stronger than fear. The night of reckoning came without warning. Elena woke to the sound of engines growling in the distance, dozens of them, weaving into the dark streets like predators. She sat up in bed, heart pounding, and before she could move, the lights cut out. The mansion was plunged into black. She stumbled from the bed, bare feet cold against the marble, every instinct screaming that this was it, the final strike. Dominic's men shouted commands in the halls, boots thundering across the floors. Gunfire cracked outside, sharp and merciless. Her door burst open, Dominic himself standing there, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, a gun in his hand, his face carved from fury. Stay behind me. I can fight, she started. No, he snapped, his hand gripping her arm with bruising strength. You don't leave my sight. The walls shook as explosions rattled the grounds. Smoke bled through the corridors, the air thick with heat and panic. Dominic dragged her through the chaos, his men forming a shield around them, bullets sparking against the walls. In the foyer, enemies had already breached the doors. Black-suited figures stormed the marble, shouting, firing, their weapons spitting fire. Dominic pulled Elena behind a column, returning fire with ruthless precision. He moved like a man possessed, every shot deliberate, every motion born of rage. But there were too many. Elena's pulse raced. She pressed against the stone, glass shards digging into her palms, watching Dominic fight with the weight of the world on his shoulders. And then, she saw him falter. A bullet grazed his side, blood blooming through his shirt. He gritted his teeth, but the stagger in his stance tore her apart. She couldn't stay hidden anymore. She crawled across the floor, grabbing the discarded gun of a fallen soldier. Her fingers shook, but she forced herself to lift it, to aim at the shadow closing in on Dominic's back. The shot rang out, echoing through the hall. The man dropped. Dominic's head whipped toward her. His eyes blazed. Anger, relief, something deeper. Elena, he growled, striding toward her. I told you. You told me to stay alive. She cut in, voice trembling but fierce. This is how I do it. There was no time for argument. Another wave surged through the shattered doors, more than even Dominic's men could hold back. The mansion groaned with the weight of war. They fell back together, step by step, Dominic's arm curling around her protectively as they fired, as glass shattered and marble split. The air burned with smoke, ears ringing from gunfire. Then, from the chaos, a voice rose above it all. A name. Caruso's second in command, a man as ruthless as his fallen boss, stepping into the light with murder in his eyes. "This ends tonight, Viero." Dominic's jaw clenched. Yes, it does. The two men collided in violence, fists and bullets and blood. Elena stood frozen, watching the man she loved battle like a beast against the enemy who had stolen everything, her father, their peace, their chance at life. She wanted to scream, to intervene, but the fight was theirs alone. Dominic staggered under a blow, blood dripping into his eye. For a heartbeat, Elena saw the man behind the myth, the boy who had clawed his way into power, the man who had carried loneliness like a weapon, and in that heartbeat she knew she couldn't lose him. She lunged forward, grabbing the knife that had slid across the floor during the scuffle. With a cry, she hurled it toward Dominic. He caught it midair, spun, and drove it into his enemy's chest. Silence fell. The man collapsed, lifeless, and the remaining enemies scattered like shadows fading at dawn. Dominic stood over the body, chest heaving, blood soaking his shirt, eyes blazing with victory and exhaustion. Elena rushed to him, hands trembling as she pressed against his wound. "You're bleeding! Oh God, Dominic!" He caught her wrists, holding them against his chest, his gaze locking on hers. "I told you, Elena, I'd burn the city for you, and I have." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Then live. Please, live for me now." For a long moment, the weight of death hung heavy in the air. But Dominic's grip tightened, his breath steadied, and for the first time since the war began, hope surged between them. The battle was over. Caruso's reign had ended. Dominic Viero had chosen love over vengeance, and survived. As dawn broke, Elena sat with him on the ruined steps of the mansion, smoke curling into the sky. His men cleared the wreckage, but for once, the city seemed still. Dominic's arm wrapped around her, heavy but steady, his lips brushing her temple. "You changed everything," he whispered. She leaned into him, her heart breaking open with love. "So did you." And in the quiet aftermath of war, they found their victory, not in blood, but in each other. Would you risk everything for love, even if it meant stepping into the fire? The mansion stood in ruins, but for the first time, Elena didn't feel like she was trapped inside a cage. The smoke had cleared, the guns had quieted, and the city seemed to hold its breath. The war was over. Caruso's shadow had been burned away, and Dominic Viero, bloodied, bruised, but unbroken, sat beside her on the cracked marble steps as the dawn broke across the horizon. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of everything they had survived, everything they had lost, and everything they still had left. Dominic's hand found hers, their fingers threading together, not as captor and captive, not as boss and burden, but as man and woman. Elena turned her face toward him. "You lived." Her voice trembled, a tear sliding down her cheek. His dark eyes softened in a way she hadn't thought possible. "For you." She pressed her forehead to his, her lips brushing the corner of his mouth. "Then don't stop. Live for us." The words seemed to ignite something in him, something he had kept locked away his entire life. He kissed her, slow and certain, not as a man starved by war, but as someone who had finally found home. Weeks passed, and the city adjusted to its new order. The Carusos were gone, their allies scattered. Dominic no longer had to fight shadows on every corner, though his empire still loomed large and powerful. Yet within the marble halls of the mansion, a softer life began to grow. Elena reopened her bookstore. Dominic's men walked the sidewalks now, Not as predators, but as guardians, keeping her world safe. Customers returned, Sophia teased her relentlessly, and for the first time in years, Elena felt the weight of grief lift from her chest. Dominic came often, his tall frame filling the narrow shop, his tailored suits a stark contrast to the stacks of dog-eared novels. He would sit at the back, pretending to read, though Elena knew he was watching her more than the words on the page. Sometimes he would tease her, sometimes he would sit in silence, but always he was there. One evening, as the last customer left and the bell above the door stilled, Elena locked the shop and found him waiting. "You don't belong in boardrooms and war rooms," she told him softly, brushing dust from his sleeve. "You belong here, where it's quiet, where the only battles are between the pages." His lips curved faintly. "And if I said I belonged wherever you are?" She laughed, the sound light and unguarded. "Then you'd finally be right about something." Their love grew in the spaces war had left behind. Dominic softened, not in strength but in presence. He no longer carried the city like a burden. He carried her like a vow. Elena no longer lived in fear of shadows. She lived in the warmth of his promise. And in the quiet moments, when his hand brushed hers across the bookstore counter, when he leaned close to whisper that her voice still haunted him, when she kissed away the lines of exhaustion from his brow, she realized her mistake had not been a mistake at all. It had been fate. The wrong number, the wrong night, the wrong world, all leading her to the right man. On a late spring evening, as the sky burned gold and the scent of roses drifted through the garden, Dominic pulled her close, his lips brushing her ear. "Elena Vale," he murmured, voice low and certain. "You saved me, in ways you'll never understand." She smiled, her heart swelling as she pressed her palm against his chest, feeling the steady beat beneath her hand. "And you gave me back a life I thought I'd lost." Their kiss sealed it. Not a desperate collision this time, but a promise of forever. The empire of shadows had found its light. And Elena, once a forgotten girl behind a bookstore counter, had become the center of a love fierce enough to silence an entire city. Would you risk dialing the wrong number if it meant finding the right person? Someone who would burn the world just to keep you safe?